our Groundskeeper chat series. I am your host, Meg Kruger, and today I'm excited to welcome my two co-hosts, Christopher Bell, who is here on camera with me, and Weston Appenfeller, who is in, a little fairy dust for Weston. He's like, oh, geez. Weston is joining us from Vermont. So we're getting a nice little view of his backyard here. And I'm going to let Weston introduce our guest. She is someone that we are very excited to have on. We had to go to the president of Pioneer in order to secure this guest. So we're very excited to welcome her onto the series. Weston, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Meg. Today's guest comes to us from Minnesota, someone that I've personally known for a decade or so. I would consider a great friend in the industry, a funeral home director's daughter, and commonly known as the Toro lady, Miss Paula Sliefert. How are you, Paula?
Good, Weston. I see you retain some of that nonsense of information.
Yeah, that basically just means you and I have hung out after hours at some point in time, grabbing dinner or a drink. So, yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, we will have to dive into funeral director's daughter at some point. I'm sure that plays into your origin story a good deal.
Specific details.
That's awesome. So I like to get us started with the first question, which we do not list on the question. So we throw you for a curveball right off the bat. Work is work, but life is the more important part. What do you find fun? What do you do outside of work? What do you like to get into?
I appreciate the question. Thank you very much. I am an avid book reader. So I have a book all the time, usually 2 or 3 books throughout my house laying around, always on a plane. I'm a traditionalist, so I have the hard copy books on planes. I often watch movies, but it's the concentration time I have on planes that I enjoy reading books. But I can tell you, I have no kids of my own, but I have 7 nieces and nephews. I would call them my whole world, along with my siblings, obviously. But I spend a lot of time trying to help them become mature adults, and sometimes they do adulting well and sometimes they don't, just like all of us on this podcast today. So I take them on an experience. I'm really proud that I love to travel and I love my nieces and nephews. So when they become 18 or graduate high school, I take them on a trip and they get to choose where. It can be anywhere in the world, but it has to be somewhere I've never been. Isn't that fun? And we usually spend about 2 weeks together. So it's really interesting because I've done it with my nieces and my nephews. And the first trip with my nephew, here's an 18-year-old. And I said, okay, he picked Iceland, which was out of the blue, fabulous country, highly recommended it. I'm like, all right, I'll be open to that. His name is Chase. And I said, all right, Chase, let's go. And so I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. And he comes up to me at one point during the planning. And he said, now I'm a little uncomfortable sharing a hotel room with you. And I said, okay. I said, we're not sharing a bed, Chase. I get it. That part's weird. I said, there's 2 beds in the room with like a nightstand in between. He's like, yeah, I just don't like that. And I smile. Here's this 18-year-old boy who towers over me, by the way, 6'4", I think. And I said, well, so here's how this trip goes. So I pay for 1 hotel room. I can secure a second hotel room, but you're probably going to have to talk to your parents about that. And so then I just let it go. And about a week and a half later, my oldest sister, Liz, calls me and said, you totally set me up. You made me say no. You didn't say no. I said, I get it. He's a young man. He doesn't want to really share a room with his old aunt. But in the end, after like the first days, Chase said, I have no idea why I was nervous about that. And we just had a ball together. I do that also because even as an aunt, you kind of lose them as teenagers for a little while. Mm-hmm. And so this is a way to create a memory for a lifetime. It's typically the first time they have ever been out of the country. And so I like to live through their eyes and the questions they're asking and the things they're experiencing. And I just think it's amazing in helping them grow as individuals, because it's certainly helping me grow as individuals, because I have to have patience sometimes on those trips as well.
Well, yeah, you've definitely secured a spot as the coolest aunt to ever join the Groundskeeper chat series. That's for sure.
Very niche group.
That is really, really unique and fun. I love that. And you also are working that aunt angle where you know, at the end of the day, you just get to throw them back to the parents and be like, you deal with the hard stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to answer that question. I don't want to pay, you know, you deal with that part. So you play the role well. I love it. That's great.
Well, I'm again very blessed, and everyone has family dynamics, so I can't profess that we're a perfect family by any means, but we certainly work on it. And my youngest nephew is 10, and we get together every holiday, 4th of July, and now they know it's real. Like, they thought I was just making it up, and then as they became older, I started taking on trips. Now the youngest one, 10, his name is Hudson. He totally knows that this is going to happen. You know, I told him to, practice pushing a wheelchair because I'm going to be older then.
I love that.
But one day randomly, he just walked up to me at some family gathering. He goes, "Paula, I'm thinking about Egypt," and then walks away. And I'm like, I looked at my other sister, Michelle, and I said, "Egypt, where'd that come from?" She said, "He's studying that in school right now."
So cool.
So it's perfect because they're thinking about it. So I really like that it's trying to broaden their perspective of the world.
So cool. And one more question before we dive in. What was the last book that you rated 5 stars?
Dare to Lead, Brene Brown.
Oh, I've read that one too.
Yeah.
Are you more of like a memoir nonfiction, or do you dabble in everything?
I'm a Dan Brown. I love all the spy, CIA, figure it out stuff. So lots of different authors that I enjoy in that. But for professional purpose, I usually have one professional and probably 2 fictional, if you will, going on at one time.
Very cool. I just finished The Women by Kristen Hanna. It was a Vietnam War historical fiction, and that was my last 5 stars.
Yeah, Weston. And to bring it full circle as far as books, like one of my all-time favorite books, and it's really a downer to bring it up, but it's The Schindler's List.
Okay.
But I have a master's degree in German, so it ties to my love of the German language, the German country, Austria, etc. So while it's a downer of a book because of what happened and transpired, if you haven't read it, it's about the Holocaust. It was still a truly inspiring book for me to read, that there's people out there that are good no matter what.
I love that. And you had a question for Weston.
I was just going to ask Weston how Green Eggs and Ham was.
I was going to say the last book I think I've read was maybe 15 Animals when my kids were 3 years old. So
we'll see. We could all have our different walks of life and still be here today to talk about groundskeeping. So, Paula, that really leads me to my first question, which is, give us your turf origin story. And I know that might be like a misleading question because you'll be like, well, I'm not a groundskeeper. But you're in this industry. And like Weston said, you're a known figure in this industry, a leader, somebody that people, love to meet, love to connect with. So what is your turf origin story? How did you find yourself, 17 years at the Toro Company? How did that all come about?
I appreciate the question. And when you become somebody in the industry, I'm not sure that's the right thing. Does it mean we have experience?
Celebrity is what is the proper term. It's what I like to use.
So again, every time I get invited to speak on one of these, I am truly honored because I am not a practitioner. I don't grow grass. I admire those that do and have to take care of all the things that go along with that. So I came from the automotive aftermarket. So I spent 15 years in the automotive aftermarket, and I'll try to abridge the story, but my father was battling cancer and I was a primary caregiver, and that company was going to invited me to relocate to Atlanta, Georgia. So I'm a Midwestern person. Mm-hmm. And at that point in my life, when you do truly get faced with career and family, I did choose family. So after 15 years, I met with the CEO because he was waiting on my decision, and I said that this was a really easy decision. I'm going to be staying back with my dad, and everyone was shocked. Everybody was in awe because I'm a career person. All my networking was in automotive, and he said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Actually, I don't know." So I looked at all of the awesome companies in and around the Twin Cities with my desire to stay within the Twin Cities. And my dad was being cared for at the Mayo Clinic, which is in Rochester, just south of the Twin Cities. So all of that was an important decision-making process in my mind going on. And I ended up applying to Mini. I applied at the Toro Company blindly, never thought in a mind's eye I would ever get it because I didn't know anybody there. I thought for sure I'm going to end up in automotive. That's where all my networking is. And my first phone interview had to do around automotive. I was in marketing, but we were doing parts. And so that's not dissimilar to manufacturer. I was with a manufacturer in automotive. Toro's a manufacturer. So I got the first interview and completely bombed. It was awful. And the phone interview, I pretty much shut it down because as I made the decision not to relocate to Atlanta, I had a whole staff behind me that decided not to also relocate. So we were all actively looking for jobs.
Oh, wow.
So when the HR person from the Toro Company, Sherry Bromley was her name, she's retired now. I said, listen, Sherry, I said, I get where you're taking this interview and I can see the skill set you're looking for. I don't think I'm your person. I think you're looking for somebody with this, that, and the other thing. And so should we just save each other a little bit of time here?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, exactly. So I did that because I was so busy and I was caring for my legacy that I was trying to leave behind in automotive. And I hung up the phone and I walked out to the 6 or 7 people that reported to me. I said, here's what not to do on an interview.
I love that.
And so before we hung up, Sherry said, you're right, Paula. You aren't the right fit for this job. That's very astute of you to bring it up. But I have another job coming up. In about 3 months, I'm going to give you a call. Never thought that call would take place. 3 months to the day, my phone rang and it was Sherry. Do you remember me? And I said, oh, yes, Sherry, I do have to apologize. I was totally curt. I was, in a different place, et cetera, et cetera. And she's like, no, you made an impression. I said, well, at least I did something. And she said, I would like to interview you for a sports fields and grounds position. And I said, oh, interesting. I said, all right, well, when should we set up time for the call? She goes, oh, no, I don't need to talk to you again. I'd like you to come in.
Oh, wow.
And so Toro is very intentional about hiring. Everything we do with the brand is hiring, probably not dissimilar to Pioneer's approach. And so it took about 4 to 4.5 months to go through the process. And in the end, they made an offer that I agreed to. So I was able to sell my transferable skill set. I came from automotive, a male-dominated industry. The green industry is a male-dominated industry. Didn't intimidate me. You just have to prove yourself. Mm-hmm. And I worked for a manufacturer before, so I knew what manufacturing was all about. And then I would call it the family feel within the company. It's a big little company. So all of the executives know your name and they know the business that you're serving, but they also demand results. Mm-hmm. And so you definitely get asked about, where are you at with this? Where are you at with that? So the accountability is there, but not without a caring and careful approach. So I ended up at Toro through that. And then I will say I have to thank Mr. Dale Getz, Mr. Boy Montgomery, because they helped me with the start of the networking out in the industry, and it just blossomed from there. So they had focus in one area, told me where we were deficient, and I started investing some time in the other places, and then we would just all three play off of each other. It was an amazing experience.
So very cool. And yeah, and what a way to make an impression. And really, what was it about the turf industry once you dove in that made an impression on you that you were like, okay, I think I can find a home here?
First of all, I loved personally the diversity. The groundskeepers might not, but I personally love the diversity. And so the amount of people that come at you and you're serving that you don't even know you're serving, that was intriguing to me, and how to break that down and figure out how best to position. How can we, if you're struggling in asking for money to get the proper inputs or equipment that you need, okay, I stepped back, and Toro has let us step back and say, can we help them reframe that? Can we help them repackage themselves so they're heard within their own organizations? So that I spent a lot of time on that. So I just assume they know the science and the agronomy of the turf, because I can't help them there. They're teaching me that part all the time. Highly, highly respect that component of it. Where I can come in and help them is to step back and translate the business side, which has to happen. And some do it better than others. Some do my job better than others, right? And so it's interesting because sometimes groundskeepers don't want that component.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, they have to do that at some point. They need staff, they need dollars, they have to deal with teams or hostile coaches, or they don't understand why this is not a mud hole and it shouldn't be. And I want to go artificial and you shouldn't, and why, and you should, and why, and all of that fun stuff that goes into it. So I always like to talk with them and help them take a pause and reflect and translate it into the language of the person they're talking to rather than agronomy speak, if that makes any sense.
And I actually did a groundskeeper chat with Boyd, and he said what you just said, that soundbite, like word for word. And it really resonated with me. You have to speak in the language of the person that you're talking to. If you are with somebody that appreciates numbers, like you got to talk numbers. If you have to paint a picture and tell a story for somebody that's more visually, persuaded, then you have to be able to do that. And you have to be able to meet them where they are. And so that must be ingrained in the Toro philosophy.
Well, and we're very collaborative in approach. So that's the other thing that resonates with me and why I've stayed with the company so long is it does feel like they invest in me professionally and they let us grow and go do the things that we can do. But when I first came and we had, we're not perfect. We're a manufacturer. Things fail. People get upset. We just would like the opportunity to make it right. Like if something's going to go wrong at some point, it's how you navigate through that maybe distinguishes you versus somebody else. So I had a product manager. So we're by product family. So we have a rotary product manager, a reel product manager, aerator product manager, et cetera. I'm not any of those. So I'm this anomaly that floats around because I'm not an expert in that either. So when the rotary motor product manager came to me, we had a customer at a higher ed university super upset with us. There was a failure. Mm-hmm. And this product manager is an engineer. He has a MBA from Northwestern. He went to Notre Dame. No dummy, right? Like I'm intimidated being by him. And what he recognized is that I had the patience to listen to all of the concerns and the, quite frankly, bitching and moaning that needed to happen to get it off the chest. Mm-hmm. And so he came to me and he said, Paula, such and such customer is so mad at me. I can't deal with them. They won't listen. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I think they're upset because you won't listen. And he said, can you make the call? And I said, yes. So I went and made the call. It was an hour and a half and it wasn't pleasant. And I sat and at the end said, after our discussion, I distilled it down to here are the 3 things that you're really, really upset about and you're looking for action on. Is that correct? Can I just repeat this back to you? Well, yeah, that sounded a lot more concise than, but he was emotionally invested, and that's fine. We all do that. I do that. Yeah. So I went back to the product manager and I said, all right, well, it's really these 3 things and it's going to cost us a little bit of money, but in the end, he's willing to give us a second chance. Mm. I said, but here's the expectation for the willingness to do that second chance. And he did that. Well, conversely, later, again, I have to present to executives at the Toro Company. I have to speak in their language, charts, graphs, data. And I will say that product manager excels at that more than I do.
Yeah.
So I try and I put the data together and I have a very basic chart. And I went to him after this call that I helped him with on a customer and said, so I have this meeting on Tuesday. Here's the data and this is what it says. And he says, not according to that chart. You're going to have to rework that chart. And I said, well, could you help me rework that chart? And so the vulnerability that we could have internally helps us grow, helps us be stronger. He totally reworked the chart in a skill set that I didn't have. And I'm trying to learn and do it in the future. But he totally helped me. And then after that meeting, he was totally vested to come to my office. How did it go? Did you get it? Did it go through? Yeah. And I don't think it would have. It did go through. I don't think it would have unless I would have been vulnerable enough to say, I think it says this, does it? And he thinks like them, like he's the Notre Dame guy. And he said, no, it doesn't say that at all. Let's rework that. So that's the good culture that we have going on inside of Toro. So the groundskeeper, same thing, ask for help.
Yeah.
And so you might think you need to know everything. So I early on, I thought, I don't grow grass. I don't know how to grow grass. I'm not belittling that by any means. I'm just acknowledging that's not the skill set I have, but it's also not what I bring to the table. And so what I bring to the table is to help you package some of the requests that you may have. And let's talk through the pros and cons, because you can always offer them 3 options. And I do use this at the Toro Company. I have certain executives that the first thing they want to do in a meeting is make a decision. So it's taken me years to learn that. So I always give them 3, get 3 options. And the first one is to do nothing. And the to do nothing means they made a decision. And they said, no, well, we're not going to do nothing. Perfect. Then we have 2 options.
Yeah.
But they feel good because they made a decision, and I got that part out of the way. But Weston, you were going to say something.
I was going to say I can totally relate to you having to take an hour and a half long call, listening to somebody complain. Chris often calls me and complains about Meg, and it's at least an hour and a half every single.
We just went down a really bad rabbit hole.
Well, like the rabbit hole I was thinking of bringing up is like, Chris and I have that collaborative, working relationship as well, where I like to do all the fun stuff and he likes to do all the work. So that really works out.
As far as the dynamics go, it does not work. But
which one of you is the graph person?
Definitely not me. Dave's the graph guy.
Meg does things that just baffle me. Right before Zoom, she changed the Zoom. Like, what are you doing?
4 minutes before, I was like, oh, I think I'm gonna, and he was like, I have to walk away. He's like, the preparedness coming from you I
had to go back to high school and remind her proper preparation prevents piss poor performance.
Does some of that relate?
We could all take a business course from you, or not all. Me could take a business course from you based on what you just presented to us. That was very insightful, much more than I'm bringing to the table. That's for sure.
Not so, not at all. We want to leverage people's strengths, right? So did it sound like Pioneer at all?
It did, especially the doing right by your customers aspect. It's very similar. And I think you would probably agree that, obviously, like you said, manufacturing, things sometimes don't go as planned. They don't, your final product sometimes has an issue. Okay. And not often, but it happens. And by helping your customer there, not only are you helping fix a relationship, but by helping them, you're also helping yourself because you're learning from it and you can get better. So it really is a symmetrical relationship between the customers and us. And I mean, it seems simple, do the right thing, help them out when you make a mistake, but it's few and far to come between these days.
Well, and in your experience, because you came from a different industry, do you think that is something innate in the turf industry where it's like you have this desire to really, it's because in my experience, it's been rewarding to give groundskeepers the tools or the right answers or the solution-based, answers. But in your experience, do you think that's like innate in the groundskeeping industry or just it's something with the company?
You asking me?
Yes.
Oh, I thought this was about Paula.
No, I wanted your take.
I'm curious too. I'm leaning forward. What's your answer?
I think so. Absolutely. I come from, my background was more association management with real estate. And that's definitely a singularly, I can talk, focused kind of industry for the most part. The practitioners are out there, yes, for their company, but most importantly for their own individual commission. Yeah. So while they support each other, it's also dog eat dog kind of world where this is super supportive of each other. And yes, we might be team rivals on the athletic field, but when it comes to actual maintaining facilities and stuff, hey, we're partners, even though we might be in the same conference, whatever. I want to help you succeed because in return, you're probably going to come back and help me one day too. Mm-hmm. And it's so supportive and unique, and in a time of such cynicism, it's nice to see.
Yeah,
I concur. Yeah, I concur, and that's probably, like you said, one of the things that keeps me when I have practitioners out there, sports field managers asking me, they'll ask me something that Toro doesn't even do. And they just know I have a network. And I guess that willingness to help, they've reciprocated that to me when I have a question, when I want to establish feedback on whatever we're doing. We call it voice of customer focus groups, whatever. So when I need access, they're willing to do that because I'm willing to help them. And so this give and take is totally a part of this industry. And that's part of what keeps me, for sure.
Definitely.
It makes it more rewarding, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, speaking of, helping groundskeepers, one of the things that I've found a great passion for is really helping them create that visibility. Because if they create visibility in their own, facility or their own community, it in turn creates visibility for our industry as a whole. And one of the things that we really wanted to dive into today is talk about how we can, capitalize on some of these big, you guys were just at the, the FIFA conference in Knoxville last week, you and Weston. And, with all the FIFA talk and World Cup, it's just having me think, how can we capitalize on these big events and turn them into visibility for groundskeepers? How can we kind of direct the conversations leading up to the games to make sure that, we're having the general public talk about the right things, not talking about those age-old misconceptions like, that we all hear about groundskeepers. So I would love to hear from your perspective, Paula, whether it was something that came out of last week or just something you've been, marinating on. What are some of those ways that we can really tap into the cultural event that is going to be the World Cup here in the United States, North America? And I would love to hear your take on that.
Well, and I would love Weston to jump in because he experienced the same research report outs, if you will, that the University of Tennessee and Michigan State have collaborated on with the funding from FIFA. And I think that was an amazing approach. Weston, do you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think I realized exactly how many people are working on the project until I was there last week. I knew Michigan State, I knew Tennessee, but I didn't realize how many individuals they had, whether it be, professors or students or just, surrounding staff that are working towards a common goal. And that is the success of each and every stadium and training field that is going to be utilized as part of the World Cup. So, yeah, I totally agree.
So one of the learnings I took away with regard to capitalizing on these, in this case, it's a global event, right? And how do we bring forward the job or career of groundskeeping, if you will, it's an interesting one because as this whole group got together, it was both the supplier community, the research community, and then the practitioners, and then FIFA, who has to pull this whole thing off, was very respectful in approach, but also there wasn't 100% commitment on how to do something. And so this rallying of which direction they're going to FIFA ultimately are going to decide to take based on whatever results is going to be quite intriguing to me. What I do know is that they did compare it to the Super Bowl, which is a American football. That's the icon of events and for the United States, basically, right? So they said during the World Cup, and this resonated with me, it's basically every match is a Super Bowl.
Wow.
And so that really framed it for me and put it into perspective. And you don't pull that off, like Weston said, it takes a village. You don't pull that off with one person. So to get people to think about, well, it's just another game. This is just another match play game. According to FIFA, it's not. It's a Super Bowl every day during those tournaments. And so if we can help them pull that off, think about how many people aspire to be on the Super Bowl crew.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that many groundskeepers aspire to be on the grounds crews for support of the FIFA World Cup. Now, not everybody will, and there's going to be some disappointment. And I have a bias, and I'm smiling at Meg because I'm totally advocating to get women on the crews for sure. Don't know whether we can make that happen or not, but discussions are certainly taking place. But that's, if you think about that, it takes a year to plan the Super Bowl year after year. They're trying to pull off a Super Bowl for 6 weeks every day.
And what they say, and they said something like, I think it was 25 women and men are needed for 6 straight weeks, 18 hours a day at each stadium. And that's not the training facilities. That's just the stadium. And so as I was walking around last week talking to different groundskeepers, just the worry on their face wasn't exactly, what surface are we going to put in or how are we going to be able to, grow grass indoors? The worry is, where do we come up with 25 staff members and also, have good fields and good, air movement and good lighting and every other concern that goes with that. One stadium manager looked at me and he's like, I'm trying to put the best staff forward for this, and they don't have any idea where to find these people. And so the support, as everyone from the backside, and I think Pioneers included, Toro's included, is really just going to be being there, listening, as Paula alluded to earlier, and making sure that if somebody calls and needs help, we can provide help in whatever way, shape, or form that is.
Definitely. And it's sounding like creating that visibility now, so that they can attract that talent, so that when the events actually happen, we can send out, aesthetically pleasing, safe, everything under the sun, those fields, but really how it's going to start now to create that visibility just so we can get the crews in place.
Then again, to lift up the sports field managers, it's not just about delivering the aesthetically safe playing surface. It's about supporting them mentally to make sure the stress doesn't take over their life and this doesn't give them health concerns and things like that. And so I paused. I actually asked the gentleman at FIFA about that. Is there going to be places or services in place to help if something like that could be supportive to whoever chooses to do it? And so the stress level is going to be amazing. So we should not just set that aside. We should acknowledge that people can use it. People don't have to use it, but what's happening there? And so again, I love people. And so I'm all about making sure you do a fantastic job. You're a part of this, a great event, but not at the risk of your health.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because when Weston mentioned those numbers, 18 people, 25 people, 18 hours a day for how many weeks, you said, Weston, the first thing I thought of was burnout and being tired and safety. You get tired, regardless of your best intentions, you're tired, you make mistakes.
Well, and then they have to return to their day-to-day job that's already, tasking. So it's like you can be in that mindset of, for 6 weeks, I just got to keep my head down, get through this, or, the 6 weeks leading up to it. Like, I just got to get through the next 3 months. But then at the end of the day, they all have to go back to facility that's been utilized at the highest level and turn it around for an NFL team to come be on it. So it's like, what a daunting task. Like, I'm sure you could hear through the audio here, like the amount of sighs that I was like, oh geez, like quick breaths. Because that's a long list of things that we have to be be about.
I'm volunteering Meg to work.
Okay.
I'm volunteering Meg to work on a crew for 6 weeks, 18 hours.
Well, at the same time, this challenge that has been put forward, I mean, these sports field managers are going to rise up. They are going to meet this challenge because what they know how to do is please people and get the work done at the highest level. Again, the burnout, you said it better than I did, Chris. Oh. The burnout is real. We have to acknowledge that and make sure we help them navigate that. But they're going to meet this challenge. And they're going to be really, really proud, maybe 60 days after they have rest after the event. But that's the part that to me is going to be aspiring. So you asked, how are we going to lift them up again, being on the marketing side? Mm-hmm. I'm already planting seeds in the capacity I can. And I invite you guys, I assume you guys are doing the same with the media outlets. And I also have been talking to FIFA. I'm not sure I'm talking to the right people yet, but every time I consistently bring it up, and it seems like a labor of love, but that's behind the scenes in my world on the marketing side that I can do to make sure when the time and place comes, we can reach out to XYZ Groundskeeper and say, we would really like to feature you. Are you open to that? And so I hope that all comes together, but this is all the marketing, plant seeds, move it around. Hopefully some of them bloom.
Definitely.
And Paul, it's interesting that people listening to this who don't work in marketing say, how is this marketing?
Yeah. And so marketing is a long-term view, right? Yep. And sometimes I have to remind my own management team about that. Because we like instant gratification. We're an instant gratification culture, if you will. But the long term is, have you guys thought about this? Have you thought about that? So the project I was mentioning earlier to you before we started recording, that was 9 months in the making, and we executed it yesterday. So how is it marketing? Marketing is always positioning for the gain. PR is a component of that.
Yep.
And that's the ultimate, what everybody consumes as content. But there's a massive amount of planning and people involved, and marketing helps steward that long-term view.
Well, yeah, daunting. I'm just I think of it always on the social media side. But yeah, just hearing you mention like, oh, you're already in contact with the media outlets and how big of a role that's going to play. And, the live viewing of all of these events, like having people on the ground that are willing to, talk to newscasters or even just be mentioned in the actual, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the actual live event, because when I was watching the Super Bowl, it's like, oh my gosh, none of these people have mentioned Nick Pappas one time. What the heck is happening? But it's like, to have, groundskeepers willing to be mentioned and willing to, so much of what's innate in a groundskeeper is like, if they're not talking about the field, it's I've won, or, it's a success if I'm not mentioned. And how do we bring them out of that mindset so that they can help lead the conversations in the right direction and also receive the kudos that they deserve when it's necessary?
You brought up a great point, Meg, and I have to say this because I did watch the Masters over the weekend. I did have that on, and the amount of time they brought up the air pat system that's under the greens was awesome.
Yeah.
And I don't have any, I don't know anybody in that company. I don't know the competitors to that company. I don't know anything about that. What I will say is I was thrilled that people are interested in the science of how to pull something at a global stage off.
Yeah.
And so that to me was amazing. You also touched on the fact you mentioned Nick Pappas. Yes, he's a great PR guy. He's a great what he's do. That's why he got hired by the NFL, right? He's definitely an industry leader by far.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to get some of these other groundskeepers who are probably introverts, maybe prepared.
Exactly.
For the spotlight. And so maybe public speaking could be something that they work on. And that can be super fearful for a lot of them. So these are the other skills that we in the marketing world could help them with, help them practice. And it is uncomfortable, by the way. It's not always fun. But when I started, 17 years ago, if the field was mentioned during the Super Bowl, like on TV, it was a cringe-worthy event. Like, oh no, something's going wrong. We never want the field mentioned. To the shift now of mentioning air pat on during the Masters, and how can we we sports fields get featured like golf course superintendents get their courses featured during when the event's going on. So to me, that's been a definite culture shift, and a good one at that. That will help raise up the industry and the profession.
Well, when we met with Larry DeVito in Daytona, and he brought up that exact point. We talked to him all about visibility and how we can bring that into the sports field industry. And he said the golf industry has been doing it for years in such a authentic way. Just they present the superintendent with a trophy at the end of a big tournament, or they invite the superintendent onto that, live newscast event where it's like, tell us about this week, and I think what you just brought up, like, it was like a light bulb in my mind, like preparing groundskeepers who are introvert, who aren't on social media, who aren't, wanting to be in the spotlight at all, giving them the tools, because it's inevitable that they're going to be asked questions, or they're going to be, and even if it's just internal, it's not broadcasted to the world, but they're going to be asked by higher ups, money movers, people that are like, how are you going to pull this off? And, they have to come to the table prepared and able to, make a case for themselves.
One thing that I always think of, and people may scoff at me, but I don't understand. I don't believe that people who work on premier facilities understand how them being in the public and speaking what they do, the technology they do to make a safe playing surface, how that knowledge, them sharing that trickles down to common parents who have their kids on the field, and to understand what a safe playing surface should look like. And it's not difficult, well, so to speak, to make that available on a smaller scale. It's not just about aesthetics and why it's an unsafe place for athletes. Because think about it, youth sports is a billions of dollar industry.
Yep.
And all these kids are out there and they're playing in ruts and they're twisting ankles and stuff. You don't have to have that as a parent. You don't have to accept that. And if you know that this is possible, and they're not just making pretty lush grass and just mowing it, they're doing more to make it safe. You got to spread that message that you should expect this for your family, not just the $1 million athletes.
And so we go ahead, Weston.
No, you go. You're the guest. You go.
So as we sat back and have reflected about sports fields specifically at the Toro Company, we view it as another piece of equipment on the field, like it's safety equipment, right? And so for a football player, American football, you wouldn't be able to send a high school player out with pads. Well, you can't send the athlete out on a field that isn't properly prepared and maintained, right? And so we view it that way for sure. And it's interesting because, again, if they are introverted, some are not, some are extroverted, but if they are introverted, it just drains them that much more to think about, I have to do this and that. And so maybe that's when they ask for help, they craft the story, but have an agent on their behalf deliver the news. Maybe it's one of their assistants that does that, and that gives them a career advance notice, et cetera, et cetera. Sorry, Weston, go ahead.
That's exactly what I was going to say. As a groundskeeper, I was fine to talk to people in public, call it 6 weeks before an event, no problem at all. Or I could talk to them a week after the event. But as the event got closer, whether it be an opening day or a championship game or whatever, I hid from whatever opportunity was put forth as far as media goes, because several reasons. One, I just didn't feel like I had time to do it. I didn't want to have to worry about it. Yep. And secondly, I didn't want to say the wrong thing and promise something that I couldn't deliver on. And until I knew that it was done and everything worked out fine, there was no chance I was going to put myself out there and have it, put back in my face as I was wrong. The field wasn't what it was. And I think it might be easier when you look at a golf course world or even some certain sports. And there's nothing, I'm not saying anything bad about any one of them and their workload, because they all work extremely hard at every stadium, every golf course that there is. But when you have athletes, call it at a Super Bowl or in World Cup soccer, where the playing surface is so important for what it is, it's different than in certain, a golf course, you have foot traffic that is walking versus, no one's going to tear into the grass and the grass falls apart. Now, it could dry up, be windy, it may not play the way they want it to, and that, is certainly stressful. But as it got closer to the event, it was, I don't know what is going to happen here, and I'm going to shut down and you're not going to see me. And that was the approach I had. And so getting groundskeepers over that hurdle, being comfortable talking as the event's happening and knowing that it'll probably be all right. And even if it isn't, people need to hear this message is going to be the biggest hurdle of having people get on board.
And I want to circle back to Chris's comment. He talked about the community fields that are out there. There's hundreds of thousands of those out there, right? And I always, whenever somebody said, "Oh, we can't do that for the Super Bowl," I always say things like, "Well, you can't do that for my community field either. You think I'm going to value that mom or dad is going to value their child less than this $1 million athlete? No." I said, so it is a challenge. There are resource constraints, there are inputs constraints, equipment constraints, all of that. But nonetheless, they expect this high level professional fields, but most of the youth playing is happening down at the community level. And so I love that Dr. Chase Straw is going after funding around sports fields, because I do think we need more research around that. And I think the commercial members within the industry that serve the industry can certainly help fund initiatives like that, because it's going to help all of us. And it's around community sports fields and surround natural turf, artificial turf, what playing surfaces should be. So it's and if he gets the funding, he's going after the grant funding. I'll be thrilled, because it'll be one step closer to reaching conclusions, or at least scientific evidence of helping with the argument one way or the other, however you want to use the data, base versus golf. Golf is a wealth of research, lots of investment in funding. So I was very supportive of him going after this grant, insofar that I invited the National Recreation Park Association to endorse him going after this grant funding, saying they would help distill the results when they came about, whatever they may be. So again, we could help the industry and help groundskeepers by investing in research, science-based decisions.
I feel like we've just hit the very, tip of the iceberg here on what can be done over the next couple of years with, all of the things that are going to happen in the sports turf world. Because yes, we have the World Cup coming, but like you said, the mom and pop operation down the road is just as important. And how do we not neglect those efforts as all this buzz happens over the next couple years, and making sure that we come out of this World Cup as a stronger industry, as, more well-versed and able to attack any situation, whether it be, divots on a ballpark field down the road, or, media training for groundskeepers. So definitely, we could probably talk for several more hours. But in respect to your time, any final thoughts, as we close up here, as far as, what on the horizon has you excited? There was, as I said, a lot of quick breaths in the audio here where it's like, oh, we have so much to be excited for, but also it's a bit daunting. But to end it on a positive note, what has you excited, whether it's 3 weeks down the line or 3 years, what, is getting you out of the bed in the morning? We typically call this the weather report. And in honor of Weston, because he's, weathering the elements here on the Groundskeeper chat. But for you, Paula, what really has you excited on the horizon here?
Well, specifically to the Toro Company, we have a continued investment in innovation, right? And so I always am very thrilled when we get to introduce new products out in the marketplace. And while COVID dipped into that, as far as resources and dollars had to go elsewhere to navigate a supply chain constraint, we're starting to now see some of the righting of those wrongs. But I can tell you, I've spent a lot of time reflecting recently about the next generation. And so while I'm here to support for sure the generation that is going through being sports field managers right now, I definitely am trying to reach down into that student aspect. You mentioned Larry DeVito earlier. I just had lunch with him on Monday, and the Toro Company hires interns. And so we're going to take them over to Target Field. When I was meeting with Larry and his other peers at Target Field, I said, how many interns do you guys have? And they said 50. And I said, well, why don't you bring them over to the Toro Company?
Yeah.
Because the green industry is more than baseball. They were opened up to that. And so I've been I don't have the answers. I'm excited to reflect on that and come up with some ideas. I will tell you the interactions and the networking, and I prefer it face to face. I may be old school. This is great. No disrespect, but I love the face to face. And I think there's a lots more rich collaboration that can take place, especially with all the commercial members out there. Again, how can we lift everybody up? How can we make the industry stronger? Yes, we have to compete. Yes, we all want to win, but there are certain components of that lift us all up. And investing in students and trying to get them attracted to our industry, I'm trying to spend some time reflecting on that.
I love that. And it's so important and such untapped potential if we ignore it, for sure.
And then let's help each other, right? Let's help each other out.
Exactly.
As best we can. But when we would compete, you're going to want to win and I'm going to want to win.
Well, winning is the name of the game at the end of the day.
For everyone.
Exactly. Chris, Weston, any lingering thoughts before we close out here?
Nothing from
Nope, I'm good.
At the same face.
No, call us out, Meg.
Well, Paula, thank you so much. This was an absolute treat. And I agree. It is great to be in person and collaborate. And I do think whenever we have the opportunity to get together, it recharge. When you come home from SFMA, you are like, oh my gosh, but then once you've recovered physically, it's that recharging, where it's like, wow, all the ideas that come out from us being together. So my wish is to have more of that in the future. I'm excited. We'll be doing all of our Women in Turf events this summer. Hopefully we can have you come out. You don't have to, work on the field. You could be like me and have a phone in front of your face and work that angle. You could still be a part of the crew. So we'd love to have you come out. I just got the Little League email yesterday. So this is me putting you on the spot that we'd love to have you have you in person this year. So
thank you for the invitation. That's quite an honor. I am that's an initiative that I'm very, very vested in. And I'm thinking about that quite a bit too.
Awesome. Good. I love to leave it at that note. So we'll close up shop here, but thank you again. I really appreciate it. And it was an absolute pleasure we've met a few times now face to face, but it was good to dive deep and hear some of your thoughts. So we appreciate it. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
Weston, thanks for joining us.
I'll be on the road somewhere.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Thank you.